is like, how do you bring academic life coaching into a university setting? And then I think we can touch on what is the difference between advising and coaching with that too.
Right, right. So, I mean, some of the biggest stuff that we've done is with schools bringing coaching into, I'll move my mic up here, people bringing coaching to the skill sets of the advisors who are currently working with students. So I think that's the most common way that universities bring coaching into schools. The what I think there's a trend happening. Well, not think there is a trend happening in higher education where a lot of the advising departments are either rebranding or adding coaching to their services. And in the rebrand of having advisors now be, we'll call them academic coaches, I think there's a little tension between when an advisor is working with a student, they may only have maybe 15 to 20 minutes to work with that student. They have pretty significant caseloads, which is not unlike a student, a college counselor in a high school, and they have very specific marks that they need to hit and make sure that a number of the students make retention number, retain a number of students. Those students need to get certain grades. So there's pressure. I mean, these are not pressureless conversations, and what we're finding, however, and what a lot of the research suggests for students who are in schools, for them to stay in school, is that it's helpful if they have a meaningful relationship with someone who is on campus. It's one of the biggest factors of a student's retention rate and engagement. And it makes sense. I mean, if you go back to each of us go back to our college years and think about, that one or two people, professor, advisor, whoever it was, having that connection with someone on campus is a pretty significant, it's a big deal. However, a lot of the advisors are not trained as coaches. And the big difference between advising as coaching is that an advisor gives advice and a coach gives curiosity and connection. And those are two not mutually exclusive things. And so when advising departments call themselves coaches and then say, hey, we want to take a coaching program, I think there's a little misconception on what coaching actually is. And then there's a misconception on how to bring coaching into advising, or if you have only 20 minutes, can you really do an explorative 30-minute, 50-minute coaching session that brings students to certain places? So I think like that's the tension, that's the question, and that's the state of a lot of universities and colleges, with coaching. And so I think we're figuring it out slowly, but there still is we see it with participants who come from universities and are surprised that as coaches, we address emotion, or we don't necessarily go straight to their grades or their academic performance, and that the sessions are student-led. Whatever the student wants to talk about, like that's the topic. That doesn't necessarily match with the current model of advising, where the advisor has an agenda and the student goes along with that agenda. So that's the geography, and that's the lay of the land. That's where we're at. And I'm curious, Ashley, because you're, as a provost, you hear a lot of the feedback from students, and you're talking to a lot of these universities in the process of them signing up. I'm curious your thoughts as well on this topic.
Yeah, it's great to touch on this and to really, I think there's so much to dive into with this. One thing that I hear repeatedly is when coaches are coming through with the university, if they just hang in there past the
Mm.
first few weeks and they allow themselves um, to be curious themselves as a coach in training and to really take in what they are learning in their training, there comes a point where it just clicks and it's like, whoa, I can see how powerful this is with the student when they start to practice it and bring it into the work that they're doing. And they're seeing these connections with the students at their universities. It's a lot stronger, but also a lot more success for the student as well, in a very whole person way, not just specifically for grades like you were just mentioning. And so and there's a lot of learning that happens just as an individual going through the program. So there's growth happening even amongst the team, the advising
Mm.
teams or the coaching team on the university, where they are understanding themselves in a different way, in a different light, and with more curiosity and growth mindset, and then operating like that with other members on the team. And so, it flows from your leadership down as well. And students in a university are going to experience that and feel and know it too when that's happening within a team dynamic too at the university. So those are some of the things that I see that are really important and powerful. But I think it's hard when you're in it, when we have this bird's eye view, because typically it's going to be
Mm-hmm.
a few weeks into a program that you start to see the light bulb go off on, oh my goodness, okay, actually this is what I can do with this in my role. And I think that's
Yeah, it can. I mean, as an advisor, some of the feedback that we get. I mean, some of the feedback that I've received when I was leading courses is specifically with university only courses, is that there are a couple misconceptions or big surprises that they've experienced along the way. And the first, I think, surprise comes down to coaching doesn't necessarily give specific action steps or doesn't suggest specific action steps for students to take, nor are there, let's say, specific study techniques that people get trained in to deliver, academic tutoring or, academic focused mentoring. And that, going back to developing this program, there were a few interesting turns that I took in putting it together that I think now looking back, I can see why, and I can see, okay, here we are. Like, if this really is going to be the future of education, let's get into it. Thing one. So when I first started this, I was a teacher, and my job was to teach Latin to people and to have a very clear, this is step one, step two, step three, this is how this works, this is how this doesn't work, this is memorization, let's grade this. And a couple of big ahas happened to me when I first got coach trained. One was the kind of conversation that I had with a coach, and this was in my early 20s, was unlike any other conversation I've ever had at that point in my life. And part of it was that the whole conversation was focused on my internal mental emotional world. Like, what's really happening with me? And what came out of that was this, it was fairly simple, but even the exploration, even that relationship, that conversation with someone where there wasn't an outside agenda, there wasn't anything that felt like it was an older person. It wasn't like they had an agenda for me. That was a big deal. And young people, when they're in schools, there is no conversation that they're having with an adult where the adult doesn't have an agenda for them, except maybe a grandparent. And then your grandparent just loves on them. Say, whatever, like, and it reminds me of that one, there was Sugata Mitra. He had that study in India where they had a computer and they let kids play with, and learn what, just self-directed learning. And then they had, they call them cloud grannies, where they had some, a person there who was trained just to acknowledge and celebrate whatever the children wanted to learn. And I thought that's really similar to a coach in some ways, someone who is there to become curious about the internal world. And so what a coach really does is a coach at their best, they take away judgment and instead they provide curiosity. And that really hit home when I was teaching, because I realized what I was doing as a teacher is I was delivering knowledge and then judging their retention of it. And as an advisor, I think what a lot of advisors do is they take in the situation and then they deliver action steps. That's useful. I mean, I would love if someone came into my life and looked at everything and said, okay, here are the action steps, go.
Yeah.
That's lovely. Like, that's value. That is a valuable thing that needs to be there. I'm not saying let's, take that away. But coaching is fundamentally different.
Mm-hmm.
Coaching as in, the conception of coaching that we're talking about from the ICF, National Health Board, all those kinds of things. Like, it's fundamentally different from an advising model.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, the conversation is more around what's happening with you. How are you doing? What do you think would make a difference in your life? What is it you're really wanting? Those are the kind of questions that a coach will come with.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we're talking, and so that involves emotion, that involves patterns of thought, that involves a lot of things that I think people in the academic world start then to feel like, ooh, is this now counseling? Is this now therapy? Is this now something that I need to go and talk to a therapist or a counselor and see, is this okay? The fundamental difference between that is a coach can address emotion. A coach can address that internal mental emotional space. The difference is that a coach does not diagnose something that's, something like, oh, you are this, or this is that pattern, or this is the malady that you're suffering, and this is the treatment this is the intervention that you need to do. There are a lot of videos, on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, that disparage coaching, that make fun of coaching. And I can understand why. I mean, there are people who call themselves coaches who are not trained. That makes sense. But there is an element where I look at those videos and think, oh, they just don't know about the coaching profession. And that's okay. I mean, I understand, I understand where they're coming from. However, the coaching profession does have a series of standards and practices that do hold validity, they hold weight. There are studies done that show the efficacy of coaching. Now, when you're as a coach and you have a question of, okay, I'm in this world, I'm dealing with emotion, I'm dealing with a client, the thing that keeps it coaching is asking your client, what do you want to do with this emotion? How is this helpful? How is this not helpful? What do you want to do with this? It's your life. These are your decisions. Where do you want to go? And that curiosity keeps it in the coaching realm. If the advisor or the helper person, gathers all that information and says, okay, this is the intervention that you now need. This is the series of steps that you need to take in your life. That's no longer in the coaching realm. That goes into the counseling realm. That goes into the therapy realm. And university staff do often have a lot of resources at their fingertips where they can contact other people in other departments and ask them, where are we with this? This is a student, I talked to them, this is what's come up. And if the leadership of the university and college is strong, those two departments will be friends. The coaching and counseling department will be friends. That's not always the case. But if the college and university leadership is strong enough to make sure that the helping professions are working together, it's a really super powerful environment for students to thrive in. And so that's my bird's eye view take on, where this started and then where it went, and then the second thing I really want to hit on is when an advisor only has maybe 20 minutes to work with a student and they give the agenda to the student and say, well, what do you want to look at? But the advisor also has an agenda as well. That is a challenge. There's no way around it. But the biggest thing is around if you, as an advisor, can be clear, and this is what my agenda is. These are the things that we need to talk about. This is what I'm seeing, and then shift into coaching curiosity mode. Even if you're asking just a few, let's say a handful, 4 or 5 questions from coach mode, that can maybe only take 7 to 5 minutes. Those are priceless minutes for the student. And the amount of connection that's built in that short period of time can be phenomenal. I just did a group mentor coaching session today. I led one, and I was listening to someone coach a young person. It was amazing how far she got in 7 minutes. Unbelievable. You can almost hear it in the student's voice. The appreciation for connection. And I think this is what all human beings are yearning for. We're yearning for someone to become curious about us, to take away that judgment, to substitute judgment with curiosity. And that leads to the third thing, which I think what happens eventually is then you have a culture of coaching that gets developed. And I think a great example of this is University of Oklahoma with Kathleen Shea Smith and what she's done with the leadership of OU. And there is a culture of coaching. It's percolated through leadership. We've talked about it. And it's so powerful when this happens because the level of safety, the level of the ability for departments to work together for the benefit of students is it gets exponentially stronger. And we're seeing it in the results that they're getting and the feedback that the students are having in all of it. So those are my thoughts, Ashley. And thanks for just letting me just go and
Yeah.
lay it out there, because this is something I care a lot about.
No, it's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. There are a few thoughts that I had. So I'm going to go back, and you kind of just touched a little bit on this again, but one of the beautiful things with coaching is it isn't trumping the value of advising. Like, there is so much beauty in advising, and life coaching is just another avenue or tool to be able to support and champion a student. And so that, I think that's the cool thing. And sometimes I think that you can feel that tension as a university participant, like, oh, I've been doing everything wrong, or I haven't been doing a good job. And it's that's not true. There's so much value as well in advising and in the work that has been done, I think, for students. And so I was thinking about that when you were talking about it. And with that, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, with the power of bringing in a few questions, even if it's like 5 to 7 minutes. And I would challenge university coaches, or actually all of our coaches in community, to do that with somebody else in your class outside of class. So you have the opportunity in class to practice coaching, but you might be going over a specific tool or something like that. But take like 5 to 7 minutes and cap yourself at that, or even 10 minutes, and coach with somebody else, and allow yourself to experience the power of a few minutes of coaching.